So what we're going to talk about today is everything that you need to know about Reaper questing as a beginner to DDO. Are Reaper quests worth it? Should you do them or not? Are they good to do? Not good to do? When is a good time to do them? Is there a strategy to do them? We're going to talk about all of that different stuff, and we're going to get into it right away. Reaper difficulty in Dungeons and Dragons Online is a difficulty mode. It is a mechanic that they added to the game that allows you to dial up the difficulty of the quests. It presents you with the most difficult content in the game as a result of that. The system has 10 difficulties. The difficulties go from 1 to 10, lower being easier, higher being more difficult. The difficulty levels in Reaper are called skulls. By dialing these skulls up or down, you alter the challenge rating of the dungeon. This system affects many things, and we're going to cover each thing that is affected by this system. But as a beginner to DDO, maybe someone new to the game, maybe you played the game and then they added Reaper since you played and now you're back. Or maybe you've played but you've just never done Reaper and you've always thought about it but you just don't do it because you don't know enough about it, or maybe there's something about it that just turned you off. We're going to go over all the different aspects of the system so you really understand everything about it, and we're going to try to cover everything. We're going to try to make it as complete a guide as possible for doing Reaper in 2024 in Dungeons and Dragons Online. I'm making this as of update 69. So let's get right into the guide. So Reaper, is it good to do or not? Should you be doing it? Is there a strategy for doing it? I can tell you right away, right up front, pretty much without a doubt, Reaper questing is the most important thing you can do in Dungeons and Dragons Online. Obviously, this is my opinion, but I think a lot of people would agree with me. It's as simple as that. It's the best thing that you can do. It's the best source of XP. It's the best source of items. It's probably the best way for you to carry out your master plan, whatever that is for you, whether you want to chase triple completionist and make that your end game, or whether you are more of a raider who just has an army of tunes, you keep them all first life, and you just like doing raids, or maybe you're a complete casual. You don't really want to get into doing the reincarnation train at all. It doesn't appeal to you. Well, Reaper is a fantastic way to increase the power of even a first life tune. You can make your character significantly stronger. Even with as few as 10 Reaper points, you can feel that power even on a first life tune. Again, you earn more experience points during Reaper quests. You gain more chances to get named loot, better loot. You'll have more of a chance to get mythic bonuses. You can even get Reaper bonuses on the loot, which is a special type of a bonus that activates in Reaper quests. It gives you even more power. And there's also a unique experience tree that unlocks new powerful enhancements for your character. So we can actually take a look at the character that I'm on right now. If we look at Reaper enhancement tree, and you can see this character that I'm on, I have 3 past lives. I have 3 heroic lives on this character and 16 Reaper points. I put most of all the Reaper points into this middle tree here, which is the caster tree. I get bonuses to charisma, I get bonuses to penetration, my spell DCs, and then my spell power. So as a caster, if I go into R1 or higher, this tree activates, and then I get all that extra power there. And that is additive on top of the stuff that I'm already getting from my heroic class tree. I'm an enlightened spirit with a little bit in tainted scholar and a drow. I have a few points in my drow racial tree, and it also is additive with the destiny trees. So all the power that you get from your destinies, in this character I have 65 points spent in my destiny. So all of these things add together, all these 3 different trees add together to give your character all this power, which makes doing, a lot of times you'll hear people say that doing low skull Reaper quests is actually easier than doing elite quests because of all the extra power that you get from the Reaper tree. So we're going to take a look at the details. So what you really want to understand to do Reaper in Dungeons & Dragons Online is how the mode works And we're going to keep it really simple. We're going to cut out all the nonsense, and we're just going to talk about the very basics of Reaper questing. So how do you do Reaper quests? Where are they? There's no particular quest line that unlocks Reaper. Anybody can do Reaper. You don't have to be a VIP. Any character, as long as you qualify. There are certain things that are specific. So some quests in DDO cannot, but those are rare. Most quests can. You can, as long as, if you're a VIP, you can at any time. If you are a free-to-play or a premium, you can do Reaper if you have the ability to open the quest on Elite. So if you're free-to-play or premium and you can open a quest on Elite, you can open it on Reaper and go in on any skull that you want. You can pick the skulls. You're not gated or limited in any way. You can pick one skull, you can pick 10 skulls. There's no cost associated with it. You can just select it and go into the quest. This is the quest giver. If I say I want to go into the quest, you can see this is there's no cost associated with selecting these. I can pick any number I want and then just hit enter and I would be able to go in. VIP accounts can do Reapers at any time. If you're free to play or premium, you have to first do the quest on normal and then you have to do it on hard. That would unlock Elite and then that would qualify you to do it on Reaper. Another way to bypass that is you could have reincarnated. If you're on a free to play, I believe you can reincarnate 2 times on a server. That will, by doing those 2 reincarnations, that will allow you to unlock quests on Elite. Another way that you can get into play Reaper quests as a free-to-play player, if you haven't done anything, is just to group up with another player in a group who can open a quest on Elite, and then they could open the quest for you. They could open the quest for you. You can go into the quest. They can leave your party, and then you can just run the quest normally, just yourself. They don't have to be with you. You wouldn't be ejected from the quest. It's just, they could open the quest for you, let you in, and then they could leave. So a lot of times people actually do that. You will see people looking for, somebody would say need an opener. And a lot of times people will, jump in, open a quest for somebody and then jump out. Another thing to keep in mind, if you go into a Reaper quest and you quest, if for any reason you need to leave a Reaper quest, you cannot get back in if you leave. So it's sort of, you've got one shot at a particular attempt. If for some reason you leave, like let's say you died and you had no way to res and you release and you're in the inn, you get healed up and then you run back to the quest and try to go in, you won't be able to go back in. It locks you out. So you don't want to leave. If you're in, the portal will lock anybody out, so that if anybody leaves the quest. So what happens is, like, if you're questing with people and somebody DCs and they get kicked out of the quest, which happens sometimes, they won't be able to get back in. So normally if they were like a friend of yours, you may have to start the quest over again because they got kicked out and they can't get back in. But that's rare. It's something to keep in mind. You don't want to leave a Reaper quest unless you absolutely have to. The other thing to keep in mind is you won't be able to do in heroics, which is basically any quest from level 1 to level 20, you won't be able to do a split of more than 4 levels on Reaper. So what that means specifically is if I were level 10, I could do level 6 quests on Reaper, but that would be it. I could not do level 5 quests on Reaper at level 10. If I was level 11, then I could do level 7 quests on Reaper, but I would not be able to do level 6. So you have a 4 levels split between how far away from and this is the base level of the quest. It does not really matter in epics and legendaries. The split in epics and legendaries is 6 quests. So right now I am on a level 32 character, and if I wanted to go into a quest, let's say I wanted to go into a quest and the quest is level 22, then that would not allow me to do it in Reaper because that would be 10 levels different. I can only be 6 levels different. But this quest here that I'm looking at, this is a legendary quest. So this quest is actually level 35. I'm level 32, so I'm actually under-leveled for this quest, so this is no problem. It's something that you will have to deal with if you quest in heroics, mostly because the level split in heroics is a lot smaller. Something to keep in mind. And in epics, questing for Reaper is a little bit easier because of that. the extra levels that you get to do that. You can do Reaper quests at any time while you're leveling up. It's completely up to you. That means that when you're questing, you decide whether you're going to do your quests on the difficulty. It's whatever it is that you think is going to work for your build. A lot of people will quest on Elite, but what I'm telling you here is that I believe it's probably in your best interest to do Reaper on one skull. Even if you have no Reaper points and you're brand new to it, to get in there and try it out. Even in level 1 quests, like in the early game when you're brand new, you can go, there are certain low level quests, level 1 and level 2. The Borderlands, you can go to the Keep on the Borderlands and do all those quests. Those are level 1 quests. You can do those all on Reaper. Or you can go into the harbor and do all the level 2 quests on Reaper. And then something else to keep in mind about doing low-level Reaper heroic quests is that champion mobs, elite mobs, what we call elite mobs in Dungeons & Dragons Online, they're champions. They have these little crowns over their head, and they're either yellow, orange, or red crowns based on how strong the champion is. Champion elite monsters do not spawn in level 1 or level 2 quests. So it is a kind of a good way to dip your feet into Reaper questing, to do like a level 2 quest on Reaper, because you won't have any of the champions spawning. The only thing that you'd have to worry about is the debuffs that you get for a Reaper, and then the Reaper monsters themselves, which we'll talk about, but you wouldn't have to deal with the champion elites at all, which is helpful when you're first getting used to the idea of questing in Reaper. So it's worth, if you're in heroics and low level, to do them at level 2. And like we said, you can be level 6 and go into a quest on 2 on Reaper, so, and do like an R1 quest when you're level 6. It would be fine. The next thing you want to think about is, if we just take a second to talk about the champions again, you see on hard and elite quests, we get the champions in Reaper too. But something to keep in mind is that the crown level that you get on Reaper is going to be higher than it would be in hard or elite. So in hard, you get the yellow crowns. In hard and elite, you get the orange and yellow crowns. And then in Reaper, you get these special champions that are red. And you can also get the yellow or orange in Reaper, but the Reaper is the only place that you would see the red crown. The red are the most powerful. They're what they call like tier 3 elites, and they hit really hard usually. But they aren't really the only thing to worry about, although they probably are one of the most scary mobs that you'll encounter. But the other thing that you have to worry about are the Reaper specific mobs. No, they're actually called Reapers. And Reapers look like wraiths. They kind of look like undead, but they're not undead. They are actually, even though they're incorporeal like wraiths, they're actually considered lawful evil outsiders. They are incorporeal and they float. They look a lot like wraiths. So that what that means is you need to have ghost touch if you want to hit them, because they're concealed by that incorporeal defensive layer that they have. They also have death block, so you can't do any sort of like death effect to them or an insta-kill effect. They float, so they can't be tripped. You can't make them slip on grease. They can't be earthquake. No form of like ground attack really would bother them. You really have to deal with them like with straight up damage, like ranged attacks, melee attacks, or spell attacks. Another thing to keep in mind, Reapers are immune to poison, and they possess a skill called Tremor Sense, which allows them to hear you through walls and doors. So a lot of times you'll be in a room and then all of a sudden a Reaper will just like fly through the door at you. It's because it heard you on the other side of the wall, and it like comes to where you are. They can also see invisible things, so you have to keep that in mind. If you're trying to sneak by a group of monsters and there's a Reaper there, the Reaper will see you. Like, they can see invisible, they can hear you, and they can see you. So they're really hard to sneak by. There are 7 different types of Reapers. As a mob specific, there are 4 regular tiered Reapers, and then there are 3 boss tier Reapers that appear only in R5 or higher. So 5 skulls or higher, you get the boss tier. We'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of what they do, but just off, just mentioning them, the 4 normal Reapers are Carnage, Famine, Fear, and Plague. The boss tier Reapers are Despair and Vengeance, and then the sort of apex boss Reaper that only appears in Reaper 7 or higher is called a Doom Reaper. And the Doom Reaper is considered like a mini boss. They're actually like immune to every form of CC. And we'll talk more about the individual Reapers later. But the main mechanic that you have to deal with in Reaper mode, aside from the extra champion, the Red Crown champion, and aside from the Reaper mobs themselves, the extra mechanic that you have to deal with in Reaper mode is the buff debuff system that is occurring the minute you enter the quest. You get this altered game rule that debuffs you and buffs the monsters. So the entire dungeon is buffed to be stronger versus you, and you are debuffed against everything, and that debuff affects you in every single way. Your damage is decreased. You have a debuff on you that decreases your damage. Your healing output is decreased. Your healing received. Champions in the quest are buffed. We already talked about that. Sometimes they get really, really strong, the tier 3 champs. Something to keep in mind with those champs is that they can be worse than the Reapers themselves. So just to recap, the Reaper mode weakens all of the players who enter, and buffs all of the monsters in the dungeon. If you select one skull, the debuff buff will be will not be that much. If you go in 10 skulls, you are massively debuffed and the monsters are massively buffed. So it's something to keep in mind. The higher the skull, you will take way more damage. You will do way less damage. You will do way less healing. You will take less healing. And then any of the attacks that happen to you will be like much more intense because of this. So really easy to die the higher skulls you go. The debuff for R1, the first tier that you go in, the first skull, it starts at 40%. You're debuffed down to 40% of your normal effectiveness, and in R10 your effectiveness is 4%. So that would be for the self-healing specifically. So on R1, when you cast a heal on yourself, you're doing 40%, and in R10 the healing that you do on yourself is 4%. So what that means is if you are going to heal yourself in R10 and you heal yourself for 100 hit points, the amount of hit points you would receive is 4 hit points, because 96 of those points would just be erased because of the debuff in an R10. So it's something to consider. If you are in an R1 and you heal yourself for 100 hit points, because only 40% of those points count, you would heal yourself for 40 and the other 60 points would be lost due to the debuff. So you have to consider that massive debuff that you have on everything that you do. All of your attacks, all of your heals, and all of the monsters are buffed. So they are going to be hitting you harder. And so it just makes it that you have to play that much better and be more on point with what you're doing. Things like crowd control become very important. And that brings us to the next point, that crowd control affects anything that you do that would CC a mob. The higher skull that you go, the less effective those effects are. Your effects are also debuffed. So if you go into an R10 and you cast Hold Monster, and that Hold Monster would last for 100 seconds, what that means, the debuff would mean that only 8 seconds would work and the other 92 seconds would be thrown out because of the debuff. The lowest number that you can actually ever have is 6 seconds. So even if you're in R10 and you cast a Hold Monster, it's going to last for at least 6 seconds, but that's the lowest it can go. Something else that you need to know about Reaper is that there is a death timer in Reaper, so that increases the amount of time between if you die, between when you can be resurrected. So in R1, if you die, the timer is set to 6 seconds. So after 6 seconds, you'd be able to resurrect. In R10, that number is 60 seconds. So it would take you a whole nother minute in order to resurrect. So that's something that you have to plan on. If you're in a really hard fight and you die, if it's an R10, you wouldn't be able to res for a minute. if you're on a healer, you won't be able to res people for a minute. But in R1, that delay is only 6 seconds, so that's not that bad. Something else to consider for Reaper questing is that you have a debuff on your defenses. So your concealment and incorporeal are reduced based on the debuff, meaning that the monsters in Reaper quests have a bypass for those defenses. So you have to have more when you go in to do Reaper questing than you would, say, on Elite questing. So starting at R1, you have a minus 10% for your concealment as a debuff and a minus 5% for your incorporeality as a debuff. Those increase 5% every skull that you go up. So at R2, it would be minus 15% concealment, minus 10 incorporeality. On R3, it would be minus 20% concealment, minus 15 incorporeality. You have to plan for that. You have to solve those problems. If you're Reaper questing, if you're doing R3, your blur spell is going to be completely ineffective because they're getting a bypass on 20 of your concealment. And the same thing with your ghostly. Ghostly gives you a 10% incorporeal that makes monsters miss you when they swing at you. Well, in Reaper Quest on R3, they're getting a 15% incorporeal bypass. Ghostly is only 10%, so they have enough to overcome your incorporeality, meaning that you're going to get hit more often. When you're building your character, you have to take that into consideration when you're stacking your defenses. You have to min-max your character for Reaper a little bit more than you would for just Elite questing. Something about this concealment and incorporeality bypass, the buff that the mobs get, the debuff that affects you, is that caps at 30% for concealment and 35% for incorporeality. So if you can get your numbers over those, then you will still be able to benefit if you do like high skull Reaper. So a good example is like displacement on a wizard grants 50% concealment. If you went in on R10, because 30% is the maximum for their bypass, you would still gain 20% of your displacement, right? So it's not as good as 50%, but it's still something. And for R10, every bit helps. Not that I'm recommending that you do R10, but it's something to keep in mind. The next thing we'll talk about in Reaper questing is that when you defeat an enemy in a Reaper quest, it has a chance to drop something called a lost soul. These are little orbs of mana. What they do when they're consumed is they refresh spell points. Hirelings cannot consume them, only players can. So if you're a melee or you're not a spellcaster, you don't want to interact with these lost souls because they won't benefit you. Just would allow anybody who's healing or casting to pick them up because they will gain the benefit of that. So what's the reward system for Reaper questing? Is there a reason to do it? Well, yeah, the reward system for doing it is very good. For the first time completing a Reaper quest, you gain a 45% bonus. When you do the quests, they count as elite completions towards credit towards saga completion points, and I will be making a separate video on sagas. If you don't know what sagas are, don't worry, I've got you. But in the short term here, for our purposes, if you do a quest on Reaper, it counts as an elite complete for a saga reward, and the saga rewards are based on the difficulty that you do the saga on. So obviously you want to do the elite completion is the best that you can do. So Reaper questing will allow you to qualify for the best rewards from saga turn-ins. Reaper also rewards Reaper experience, which is a specific type of experience that is different from heroic, epic, or legendary experience. That Reaper XP is tracked separately, and it unlocks bonuses in your Reaper enhancement tree like I was showing you here. We can actually see the XP that I have on this character is 281,397, and for me to level up to level 17 or to get my next point, I need another 7,600. That is completely separate. This bar down here is my legendary XP, completely different XP. I could be capped. I could be completely capped on XP here, but I would still earn Reaper XP because it's tracked separately. So that's something to understand, that when you earn Reaper XP, it's separate. The higher up, the more Reaper XP you gain, the higher your points go. So like you see here, I have 16 points when I hit certain point thresholds, I think it's 25 points that qualifies me to get my first cosmetic, and then the second cosmetic is at 50 points, and then the next cosmetic is at 75 points. There are unique vendors that you can purchase this specific gear from, and those vendors are in the Hall of Heroes. This particular character cannot access the vendors yet because I only have 16 points. You need to have 25 points in order to interact with the vendors, and they are over near the hardcore vendor, the mysterious remnants vendor, the Reaper vendors are right here. And so each one of these is based on, like, this is 25 points, that's 50 points, and then that's 75 points. You can talk to this one here in the middle, and it will allow you to access the Reaper crafting system, which is a separate system that we will talk about in a bit. Something to keep in mind when you're Reaper questing is that experience boosters do work on Reaper XP. So heroic inspiration, VIP boosts, guild airship buffs, experience elixirs all work to boost your Reaper XP. You may continue to acquire Reaper XP even if you're capped on heroic, epic, or legendary XP. There's no cap on Reaper XP, and you can continue to Reaper quest over and over and over on that character. There's no limit to the amount of Reaper XP you can get, although it's a very slow system, but you can. There are people out there with hundreds of Reaper points. Reaper XP also persists through reincarnation. So if you reincarnate, you keep all the Reaper XP that you earned, which is unlike if you reincarnate, you lose all of your heroic, your epic, and your legendary XP. So, but Reaper XP is different. The only thing that you need to do when you reincarnate regarding Reaper XP is reallocate your points, because what happens is your points are reset when you reincarnate. So you'd have to respend your points. There is an overlevel penalty to Reaper XP in heroics, but there is not an overlevel penalty in epic or legendary, meaning that once you hit level 20, you can do Reaper quests with a character who is at cap and you won't have a penalty. So you could be level 20, they could be level 34, which is the cap at the update 69. And you both would gain the same amount of XP based on whatever variables. If you had a elixir running, you'd get a different amount than the other person. But there's no debuff on there's no penalty. That is different though in heroics. Heroics do have a penalty. You cannot be more than a 4-level split. You cannot quest, like, you couldn't have a level 19. You couldn't be level 2 and have a level 19 run you through all the quests on Reaper. It just, they don't allow for that much of a split. The other thing too is if you go into a quest much higher level, so if you're 4 levels over the base level of the quest, you do take a significant hit in the XP that you get a penalty. I think the penalty right now is 10 or 20%, something like that. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're in heroic and you want to gain the maximum amount of XP for questing, you want to do the quest at level, meaning if you're level 6, you go into a quest that's, you do quests that are level 6 and you do them on like R1. That would give you the most XP. Or you do it under leveled. So you do a quest that's, you're level 6 and you do a level 7 quest on R1 or a level 8 quest on R1. You'd be under leveled, but you wouldn't take a penalty. If you did it over though, you take a penalty. Legendary characters, I just said this, anyone over level 30, there's no penalty, but something to keep in mind is that legendary characters over level 30 can only earn Reaper XP in legendary dungeons, meaning that if you are level 30 or higher, you cannot gain Reaper XP from epic dungeons. So an epic dungeon would be level 20 to 29. You can still do the epic dungeon. You can still complete the epic dungeon, but your XP gain would be 0. So in order to gain XP, once you are a legendary character, you have to do a legendary or higher quest, a level 30 or higher quest. But something to keep in mind is that legendary Reaper, any quest that's level 30 or higher, grants double the base RXP, meaning that if you're going to farm Reaper XP, you can get double the Reaper XP by doing the quests in legendary. You gain a first time bonus for doing a quest for the first time. So you can stack that legendary quest bonus with your first time bonus to get the double XP plus the first time and just get a massive hit of Reaper XP. So you'll see this a lot on Hardcore League. People will quest from 1 to cap in Elite, and then at Elite they'll gear up, and then they'll jump into the R4s that are going on the hardcore server, and they will work towards their hardcore goals of 10 or 20 points or whatever. That's why they do that, because you're getting double points in legendary quests, and those are additive with all of the other bonuses that you have going on. So it just makes it so that it goes a lot faster. So if you were somebody who wanted to farm Reaper XP on your tune, whether it's a first life tune or you're doing multiple past lives, way better to farm that Reaper XP in legendary content. You'll just get it a lot faster. It'll be a lot quicker, and there's a lot more groups doing it. Because of this, it's easier to find groups to do Reaper quests in legendary than in heroic. Not many people do. A lot of people still do R1s in heroics, but you're much better off just if you wanted to blast your points up to just wait. We talked about the vendors. So the unlock is 25 points, 50 points, 75 points. 25 points gets you a set of Reaper cosmetic eyes. 50 points gets you a little Reaperling pet. And then 75 points gets you the Reaper wings that you see people running around with. They're like wings of light, and they look pretty cool. Keep in mind that those wings cost 2 million plat before haggle or charisma in order to purchase. And it's a potion that grants you a feat. When you reincarnate, that is not permanent. You have to then buy another version of the potion and then drink it, and then that would reapply the feat, costing you another 2 million plat. So if you're doing a lot of reincarnation, you can quickly spend a lot of money if you want to wear the Reaper wings on every life. Most of the time what people will do is they will make a bard. During their bard life, they will go to the vendor, and using haggle and all the other things, they will buy a bunch of those the Reaper wing potions. You can get them for significantly cheaper than 2 million plat. I think you can get the price all the way down to like 600,000 platinum, 500,000 platinum, something like that. So you can stock up and keep them in your bank, in your character bank, and then you'd have them for when you reincarnated later. It's something to think about if you didn't have a lot of platinum. Platinum's pretty easy to get though. So if you're a character who's doing a lot of legendary questing, you probably will have the 2 million plat to get it pretty easily. And then the other thing to keep in mind is you don't need to wear the Reaper wings. A lot of people do wear the Reaper wings, but you certainly don't need to wear them. That's just a cosmetic. Reaper quests are great to do because they have an improved chance to drop endgame loot. With that chance being, every skull that you go in on adds 1% to the likelihood that you're going to get a named piece of loot. So what that means is if you go in without looking at the regular base chance, if you go into a quest on R1, you have a 1% more likely to gain a piece of named loot when you loot a chest in an R1. If you went in on R10, you're 10% more likely. It's every skull that you go up adds 1%. That's on top of the existing, I believe, if you do an elite quest, you have a 30% chance to pull a piece of named gear out of a chest. So that would just add. And that, of course, isn't counting any like elixirs of discovery or anything like that you have. It's something to keep in mind. For the chests, for loot, the Reaper loot is really good. There's an increase in the quality of the random gen loot. There's more likelihood on the loot to grant you mythic bonuses. And then you also have a chance to get what's called a Reaper bonus. That works. That's a piece of gear that has a bonus that works in Reaper quests only. And if you looted it and it was on a piece of gear that you didn't want to use, you actually can take that piece of gear to the Hall of Heroes where I am now. If you have enough points spent in the Reaper tree, you can crunch those pieces of gear into shards that will allow you to, if you save up enough of them, craft some Reaper bonus gear yourself. So it's something to keep in mind. It's called the Reaper Forge. This is the Reaper Forge. It's on this middle tune here. And I could take a piece of gear that had a bonus on it, and then I could crunch it into a Reaper fragment. And then if I save 75 of these Reaper fragments, I can then craft a buff that I could add to a piece of gear. So let's say I wanted to put like a Reaper bonus on that bottled rainstorm right there. If I had 75 Reaper fragments, I could apply a buff, whatever the specific buff would be for a trinket. Most people who work with this crafting system want to apply the buff to the helmet because the Reaper bonus to helmets are just way better. It's a +2 to all your ability scores, so that's usually what people are chasing. But so you can see that legendary Duskbone ring, when I looted it, it had a Mythic 3 bonus on it, which is great. And then it also has that Reaper enchantment there, which is a PRR rating +3. Whenever I do a Reaper quest, my PRR goes up an extra 3 points. If I wanted to take that, because that Reaper enchantment, that's what you would take. If I didn't want this piece of gear, if I wasn't going to use it, I would take this piece of gear to this vendor here, and then I would drag this over here, and then I would crunch it and turn it into a Reaper fragment. And then what you can do is you can save the Reaper fragments. I'm not sure how many I have. I don't even think I have enough to make a piece of gear, but I'll take a look. I just keep them in my shared bank. So if I call them Reaper, yeah, so you can see I guess I spent them. I added a buff to something, so I only have 4 fragments left. So it's quite a slow crafting system, but it's definitely something that you can aspire towards. I wonder I forget what piece of gear I put that bonus on, but it was a helmet. I think I put it on a crafted helmet that I not a crafted helmet, but like a dinosaur helmet that I have. Okay, something to keep in mind about the reason why you would want to do this Reaper crafting is because the Reaper crafting system, the bonus type on this Reaper is a Reaper bonus, and in DDO the types of bonuses that are different stack, but bonuses that are the same do not stack. So because that Reaper enchantment is a Reaper bonus, that will stack with everything else, just like that mythic bonus, that mythic ring bonus is a mythic bonus. So in DDO, you'd want to look out for sources of bonuses that are unique, and Reaper qualifies, which is the reason that people chase it, because it's another way to increase the power of your gear. So when should you do Reaper? My opinion is that you should do it as soon as possible. The benefits for doing Reaper are so strong, you gain so much strength from the Reaper trees, that earning the XP as often as you can is what I recommend. Keep in mind the difficulty gets significantly harder. The higher up you go, the more skulls that you use, it gets significantly harder. So you might find early on when you're under 20 Reaper points that you might cruise through an R1, but you struggle in an R2 and you get obliterated in an R3. That's just totally normal. Once you get some points under your belt, like 20 or 30 points, then everything starts to feel good in like R2, R3. So keep in mind when you're turning up the difficulty, you don't want to make it so that it's too much of a slog, that the time to finish the quest, because it just gets a lot harder really fast. Like the difficulty isn't a little bit. The difference between an R2 or R3 might not seem like a lot, but it actually is. The difference between an R3 and an R4 is huge. The difference between R4 and R5 is huge. So like it is definitely worth just starting on R1, get used to it, and then maybe try R2 or R3 just to see what the differences are. But there's really no reason, as long as you're earning some Reaper points, you're doing Reaper, you're interacting with the system, you're going to be moving forward. You can dial it up if you have a good group, you're running with someone who has over 30 Reaper points, maybe that their extra power would allow you to like blow through the content a little faster. But if you're soloing and you really just want to get your feet wet and get used to playing them with the mechanics and dealing with like how Reaper questing really changes things, how we have the tier 3 champs, you're debuffed, that all the mobs are buffed. So like it just takes a little bit to get used to. So it's something that you want to think about. And the other thing too, which is absolutely important for you to think about, is like there are quests that are just super difficult anyway, So whether or not it's worth doing those quests on Reaper, you may be better off just doing them on Elite as opposed to trying to slug through it on Reaper. If it's already a super difficult quest for you, this isn't about torturing yourself. It's about like progressing and having fun playing a video game, right? So, and then there are other quests that are super easy, so maybe you could dial it up and do, you know, like a higher skull just because the quest itself is easy. So it's going to be something that you're going to have to decide based on specifics about your situation and how you play and things like that. Another question you might be asking is, okay, going to do Reaper. I've decided I'm going to do Reaper, but like, what about my build? Does it matter what build I'm on? What's the feeling there? Very simply, yes. Your build absolutely matters for doing Reaper. You want to be min-maxed. You want to be on a character that you enjoy playing, that you're good at playing. You want to understand your character, the build, whatever your role is. You want to know how to play that character. So if you're a tank, if you're a DPS, if you are a healer, you want to know. If you're a trapper, you want to play your character in a way that is effective because you find it fun. You shouldn't go into a Reaper quest on a character to farm Reaper XP that you don't enjoy because it just won't be fun. And you also want to understand your build. So if you're a melee build and all of your feats are towards melee and you're trying to shoot a bow and arrow at everything, you're doing it wrong, right? Like, you want to know what you're doing in there. So you want to min-max yourself. Use your strength to your advantage, because just by going into a Reaper quest, you're debuffing yourself. And all the monsters are buffed against you. So you want to know what you're doing. You want to know how to do your rotation. You want to know your defenses, when to cycle your DCDs. You want to have the best gear that you have on. You want to know what it is that are your big damage attacks. And then the other thing too, you have to keep track of like how to heal yourself, because healing is, you got a debuff on you, right? So how are you going to get healed? Are you going to use hirelings? Are you using potions? What's your source of healing? Are you running with a buddy that you can cross heal each other? You have to solve these problems. And so that's part of the reason why I'm decided to make this video, is to help you solve these problems. So for healing, like, yes, you want to have heal scrolls if you can cast them. You want to have potions, but in combat, you won't be able to really effectively heal yourself. So you want to have like another option. Are you using a hireling? Are you running with a friend who can throw heals on you? Or are you just going to basically like do the combat until you have to flee? And then if you flee, if you're out of combat, I think you're out of combat for 8 seconds, then the healing debuff goes away and you can heal up normally. But once you get back into combat again, the debuff would activate, so then you wouldn't be able to heal. So those are the problems that you want to think about solving them. And so we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about solving some problems in Reaper Quest. So we went over in general that Reapers are incorporeal evil outsiders, and we're going to take a look at some of the specifics of the actual Reaper mobs themselves and what it is that you'd have to watch out for. We talked a little bit about them earlier. There's 7 different kinds of Reapers, 4 normal tier Reapers, and 3 boss tier Reapers. The boss tier Reapers don't appear until you hit R5 or higher. Of the boss tier Reapers, there's 1 apex boss, and that doesn't appear until R7 or higher. That's the Doom Reaper. The other Reapers are the normal tier Reapers are Carnage Reapers, Famine Reapers, Fear Reapers, and Plague Reapers. Boss tier are Despair, Vengeance, and then Doom. Doom is the apex. And so let's talk about the details of the specific Carnage Reapers. These Reapers are melee. They do an extremely high amount of melee damage. Think a good metaphor for them is Indiana Jones and his one-punch knockout. That's pretty much what a Carnage Reaper will do to you. if it gets close enough to you. It can just basically one-shot you if you're not careful. If your defenses aren't up to par, if you don't have enough hit points, if you get caught flat-footed and a Carnage Reaper takes a swing at you, it's a good chance it could erase you. Because they're melee, though, that gives you a strategy to deal with them. Just stay away from them. They also, when they hit you, they inflict a vulnerability on you that makes you likely to take more damage in the future. So the more hits they get on you, the more damage they do to you. This is additive to the debuffs that are already on you for the Reaper quest to begin with. So it can get very ugly very quickly. The next type of Reaper is a Famine Reaper. Famine Reapers are spellcasters. As soon as they enter combat with you, they get a buff, and that buff stacks every 10 seconds. That buff is called Doomcaster. You'll actually hear it. It sounds like a shimmer, like a wave or something. You'll hear it as they go through this buffing. The longer they get this, the higher that buff goes, the harder they hit you when they cast a spell. So I have seen a Famine Reaper cast like a Horrid Wilting that it did like 6,000 or 7,000 damage to me. A Famine Reaper that wasn't taken care of right away. It got stacks of this Doomcaster buff. So you really have to be careful with these spellcasters, these Famine Reapers. They will teleport to you if you try to move away. They'll teleport to you. They also have a hit. If they get within melee range, they don't even have to hit you. If they get to melee range of you, they put out a what's called a slowing touch, which slows your movement speed by 50%, and it lasts, I think it's 4 seconds. So you have to be really careful if a Famine Reaper teleports to you. The next type of Reaper is a Fear Reaper. Fear Reapers put out an AoE stacking dot. Damage over time. That damage over time affects all characters in range, 18 meters out from them. It's quite a far distance. You'd be surprised. That dot grows until the Fear Reaper is dead, or you are dead, or you flee. If you flee far enough away, that dot will fall off of you and you won't take any damage. But as long as that dot is on you, every time that ticks, it's called Fear of Death. It is going to do, I think it's bane damage. There's no way to block it. So you will just take orders of magnitude of stacking damage that you cannot mitigate. There's no way to get out of it. So you want to kill Fear Reapers immediately, and you want to gap close and get right up next to them, or you want to flee. The worst place to be with the Fear Reaper is like mid-range, because the AoE stacking Fear of Death dot is going to hit you, and if you can't get to the Reaper to kill it, that dot's just going to keep growing until you have 5, 6, 7 stacks, and then you're just going to die. So what usually the best course of action to deal with a Fear Reaper is gap close, get up to it, kill it, and then anybody who's got the dot, group up and then just spam heal, group heals on yourself, and hope that depending on the skull that you're in, the Reaper skull that you're in, that you can out heal the dot damage. Sometimes if you're in R10, that's impossible to do. There's something to really keep in mind if you play on the hardcore server, that Fear Reapers can be like a really easy way to get erased. So you wanna either stay far away from them, or run right up to them and just deal with them immediately. The next type of normal Reaper is called a Plague Reaper. Plague Reapers are melee, and they don't hit as hard as Carnage Reapers. They still hit very hard. Their main thing is that once they hit you, they apply a debuff to you. And what that debuff does is it turns off all of the healing that you receive. It doesn't turn it off 100%. It's like 99.9%. So the healing that you can receive is greatly diminished when you have that debuff on you. So that debuff that they put on you lasts 4 seconds. What happens is they'll hit you, they'll debuff you so you can't heal, and then they'll hit you again. And because you have their debuff on you and cannot be healed, if you don't dispatch them right away, it's a great way for something else or the Reaper itself to kill you, because anybody in your party wouldn't be able to heal you and help you out. As long as that debuff from the Plague Reaper is applied to you, your healing is reduced 99.9%. So you have to wait. You have to get away from the Plague Reaper. Hopefully somebody killed it, or they CC'd it somehow. You get away from it. You get away from all other monsters because you won't be able to get any healing until that debuff goes off, and then you could heal up normally. Hopefully, if you're alone, you have a method to heal yourself, or if you were in a group and you were in a high skull Reaper, that's something where, like, if you're in a group, the healer would have to watch for you and wait for the, you know, usually like a good healer would see your debuff and then see when it's off and then heal you immediately. The first boss tier Reaper. Boss tier Reapers appear in R5 or higher, and the first one is the Despair Reaper. Despair Reaper is really nasty because what it does is it applies a buff to the monsters around it. It has like an AoE effect, kind of like in the game right now. My Warlock has that aura, that shimmering enlightened spirit aura you can see. Well, a Despair Reaper has the same sort of an aura, but it's like red. And what happens is any monster that's in that aura gets buffed, and any player that's in that aura gets debuffed. And the buffs and debuffs affect all aspects of combat. So your saving throws are debuffed by a lot, and monsters are buffed by a lot. So it just becomes a lot harder to deal with monsters, especially if there's a champion who's getting this Despair buff. The buff from the Despair Reaper stacks 5 times on monsters, and the debuff stacks on you as well. And you will see a message that says, your enemies grow stronger as you despair. That's exactly what's going on. You are getting even weaker, and the monsters near you are getting stronger. So it just makes it imperative to deal with the Despair Reaper, especially if you are in like a mob dense room where there's a lot going on and there's champions. Those champions could just be buffed to the point where, you know, they could 1 or 2 shot you if they got close enough to you. So that's something that you really have to plan on dealing with the Despair Reapers. And this is a reason why they're boss Reapers, right? They're a little bit harder than the normal tier Reapers. The next one is called the Vengeance Reaper. These also are boss. It's a boss Reaper. It appears in R5 or higher. And this Vengeance Reaper is a spellcaster. So it's sort of similar to the Famine Reaper. The difference is, though, that the Vengeance Reaper will also do melee if you get close enough to it. And unlike any other Reapers, they spawn these blue circles that will appear underneath your feet. Sometimes they can appear in the air. If you do not see this and you're caught in it, those circles explode and they do a massive amount of evil damage. So basically it's like it's a one-shot, basically. So you don't want to get stuck in a Vengeance Reaper circle. If you're doing quests where Vengeance Reapers appear, you will often hear, if people are in group, they will often shout out, like, circles on the ground. That's what they're talking about, the Vengeance Reaper circle. You need to look underneath you, see if you're standing in it, and move out of it. If you're caught in it, you're going to die. Even if you have really good defenses, you would need probably to have, like, 10,000 hit points in order to survive it. I mean, you can survive it, but it just does a massive amount of damage. You don't want to be stuck in it. The other thing about a Vengeance Reaper is that when they die, they explode. So similar to other games, like if you played Diablo 4, there's a lot of monsters who have on death effects. They explode, and if you're too close to them, they can one-shot you. Vengeance Reaper won't one-shot you when it explodes, but what it does, the explosion buffs all the other mobs around it with a vengeance buff that greatly increases their damage. So what happens is the Vengeance Reaper dies, it blows up, and then all the mobs that are hit by that explosion are buffed with something called They Carry My Vengeance. Mobs that have the They Carry My Vengeance buff do greatly increased damage. So if you had a tier 3 champion, a red crown champion that got buffed with the They Carry My Vengeance from a dying Vengeance Reaper, it's probably going to hit you and do like 30,000 damage or something ridiculous like that. That it would just be so much damage. So it's very bad if that happens. The buff is very strong. So what you want to do the tactic to deal with Vengeance Reapers is to kill them last. You need to isolate them if you can. You need to separate them from all the other mobs if you can. Kill them alone. If you can't separate them, if you can't isolate them, then what you need to do is CC them until everything else is dead, and then you can kill the Vengeance Reaper. If for some reason there's multiple Vengeance Reapers, you want to basically CC them both, try to separate them and kill them separately. You'll see this happen a lot. It's one of the reasons why high skull Reaper quests can just go south really quickly, is because what happens is someone kills a Vengeance Reaper without thinking about it, and then the vengeance buff goes out on all the mobs, and then the mobs just start killing everybody. And so now everybody's dead. And it's because somebody accidentally or without knowing killed a Vengeance Reaper early. And that would be awful, especially like I just said, if that buff went out on a champ. So don't be the person who pisses everyone off by killing the Vengeance Reaper too early. Don't kill them until everything else is dead. Do your best to CC them. You need to isolate them, move them away from the other mobs. If you can't do that, then you just have to CC them somehow. If you can't CC them somehow, and it's probably better to just retreat until you can get a better sense of like the battlefield. And it's way better to retreat than to kill it and buff everything, and it's just going to make the quest. Now, luckily, that vengeance buff doesn't last forever. I think it's a 5-minute buff. It used to be permanent, but I think now it's 5 minutes. So it's something to consider. If somebody did kill a Vengeance Reaper too early and then all the monsters got buffed, you'd have to wait before you were able to fight those mobs that got buffed again. And that can buff any monster. So the last Reaper that we're going to talk about is the Apex Reaper. This is the Doom Reaper. This is the Big Daddy. This is the R7 or higher. This Reaper has boss immunities. It cannot be CC'd at all. Doom Reapers are 100% melee. They hit like a Carnage Reaper, very hard, and they put a stack on you called a Mark of Doom. The Mark of Doom will go on to whatever target they have aggro on. If the Reaper is aggroed on you, you are going to start building up these stacks of the Mark of Doom. Mark of Doom just makes you take more damage, and it will stack up to 7 times. When it hits 7, the next melee attack that they hit you with will be like a nuclear explosion. It will probably one-shot you. So what people do to deal with the Doom Reapers is they will like cross taunt. So like somebody will carry the Doom Reaper for like 2 or 3 stacks of this Doom, Mark of Doom, and then somebody will taunt it off and carry a few of the stacks, you know, get like 2 or 3 stacks, and then somebody else will taunt it off. That way they're ping-ponging it back and forth, so nobody's actually stacking up to 7. If you had somebody who is like a super uber tank, you know, they're really good at playing their tank. Some people do like pop TCDs and like they will take the 7 stacks, but generally what you want to do is if somebody has aggro on it, that person runs around while everybody else nukes it and tries to get rid of it. They're really not that fast, so you can outrun them but they will usually chase you all over the map. So it's usually better to just deal with them. But the point is, you know, to deal with these different Reapers, you want to have a plan. Some of them, most of them, all 6 of the 7 can be CC'd. Figure out a way that you're going to deal with that, whether you sap them or stun them, hold them. They can be feared. You can use fear effects on them. You can dance them. All of the Reapers can be CC'd except for the Doom Reaper. Dancing balls work. Auto's irresistible dance works. You can color spray them. You can confuse them. There's a lot of different options you have to CC them. I highly recommend, if you are going to be Reaper questing, that you work into your build a method to deal with Reapers and how to stop them, CC them somehow, whether it's using Dragon Roar on a Dragon Lord, whether it's you're a wizard and you're casting Hold Monster, maybe you're a Favored Soul and you're using Color Spray, you know, whatever it is that you have like a means of CCing them. And so that brings us to the next question. Well, okay, now I'm ready to do Reaper, but what's the best build? Is there a best build to do Reaper questing? As of right now, as of update 69, the best build, I would say probably one of the best builds in the game to do Reaper questing on is the Dragon Lord, the archetype of the fighter. Hands down, it is an extremely versatile, high DPS archetype that gives you access to Dragon Roar, which allows you to CC any monster. It also gives you access to Flight of Kings, which is a gap closing. You can fly through the air to get really close. So that would allow you to, if there was a Fear Reaper, you could instantly like get up to it and start attacking it. And because they're fighters, they get access to a ton of feats that are very useful for doing CCs. They put out massive damage. So as of right now, like I said, if this video is still on YouTube in 10 years, we're in update 69 right now. I would say the best class, if you were brand new and you wanted to make something, is Dragon Lord. That's the archetype for the Year of the Dragon, the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons Online. They made the Dragon Lord archetype for us. There's a lot of other really high performing builds. Anything that can do color spray. So if you were on, like I said, Favorite Soul, any like charisma build, a sorcerer can do color spray. If you were on a sorcerer, you could also do like Hold Monster. If you're on a wizard, you could cast like, any autos, Dancing Ball, any of the CCs that you can do. And then Favorite Soul is also a good choice because they have their angelic wings. So that allows them to move really quickly. So if a Reaper was up next to you, you could wing away. So usually on Hardcore League, what I play is a Favorite Soul just because I do end up doing Reaper questing. And Favorite Soul is just a little bit stronger for doing Reaper quests than, say, like a Cleric. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't. So the other way to answer the question is what build is really great. It's Dungeons and Dragons Online really responds well to you playing your character well because you enjoy it. So like I would say if there's a certain thing that you want to do that you do well, then you'll do well in the game no matter what. It's just when you do Reaper, you just have to plan out for the certain scenarios that we have by going into Reaper quests. Like you have to problem solve the debuffs. You have to problem solve the crown champions, the tier 3 champions. You have to problem solve the different Reaper mobs themselves. You have to problem solve how are you going to get healed. You're going to have to problem solve for CC. If you're not going to CC, you have to problem solve by staying far, far away from certain Reapers. Like you can range all of these, right? So if you're on a ranged class that had no CC, well, that's fine. You just have to like do a lot of kiting, right? But that's certainly viable. The other thing too is if you're not running with hirelings, like how are you going to get healed? Are you running with a buddy? If you're soloing, how is your self-healing? The other thing you want to take a look at if you really wanted to do research and sort of min-max yourself is just check out what people are talking about on the DDO forums. Check out your favorite content creator. Maybe they have like posted videos on what their favorite Reaper build is or what they do for Reaper, or you can watch a lot of people who post content play Reaper. So there's, they may just like me here on this channel, I do a lot of Reaper questing. So if you were just watching me play, normally you would see how I deal with certain things that occur in the Reaper quest just as a natural course of playing and how I solve those particular problems. Like a really good example, if we look at the build that I'm on right now in the game, I am on my minion build enchanter. This is my build for my warlock. It's on the DDO forum if you want to go look at it. And how I solve the problems is not only am I using a minion, which I get the heart ally from Primal Avatar. There, it's the tier 5, my little minion that I'm throwing down that acts as like a turret that will DPS and heal for me. But I also have my heals are solved by Rejuvenation, Cocoon, and Renewal. Like I have 2 separate heals. I also have Shining Through, which is another way to get hit points. So, and then this here, Shard Storm. So I've got temporary hit points. This provides me with temporary hit points. As a warlock, I also get my temporary hit points by being in Enlightened Spirit. I get this right here. Brilliance gives me temporary hit points. So then I'm rolling hots on myself, so I just have to cast Renewal, Rejuvenation, Cocoon. and then I get those hots. I also have access to False Life, which is temporary hit points, Greater Heroism, which is temporary hit points. So like I'm constantly like rolling these sources of temporary hit points on myself that can get me all the way up. You can see I'm almost at 3,000 hit points, right? So if I'm in a Reaper quest now, depending on the skull of Reaper, R1, 3,000 hit points is going to be great. R10, not so much. That's going to be rather weak. But the point is, it's all added towards the same idea of solving problems. So when a lot of people like look at my build, they think, oh, I would do this different. Oh, I would do that different. A lot of the reasons that I have these things is because they're solving very specific problems that occur when you quest a lot. And I do a lot of solo questing. So like I have to cover, the reason I have so many sources of temporary hit points is because temporary hit points are not debuffed by Reaper. So the Reaper debuffs that you get on normal heals, they don't count when it comes to temporary hit points. So when I pop the Shard Storm, I am getting 600, whatever it is, you can see it right there. I have 1,000 temporary hit points right now. Like that's not affected by the Reaper debuff, that rule that debuffs you. So as a Warlock also, I'm constantly generating temporary hit points. So it just makes, on this particular build, really strong as far as like staying alive, because now I have 1,200 temporary hit points that are not debuffed by the rules that are in place on the Reaper when you enter a Reaper quest. So something to keep in mind. But to get back to the issue of what the best build is, like I said, my opinion right now, update 69, Dragon Lord is probably the best build that you could do for Reaper questing. If you were brand new to it and you've never done it and you wanted to try a build out, that definitely is like S tier as far as builds go. The specifics of the build, you would need to like look on the forum or talk to a creator that you liked or people that you play with to find out like what specifics for the Dragon Lord. But just overall, the Dragon Lord fighter archetype is just super strong. The Warlock that I'm on is super strong. There's a bunch. Favored Soul is a really good option for doing Reaper questing, but at the end of the day, really, it's a video game. You should play what you like. So, I mean, you could say, hey, I'm on a Bard. Can I do it on a Bard? Absolutely, you can do it on a Bard. You can do Reaper questing on any character. Once you get, like I was saying earlier, once you get about 20 or 30 Reaper points, R1 starts to feel easier than Elite quests because the power you get from the Reaper tree starts to ramp up. So it really starts to, like, add to your power. It makes it like it's very satisfying to feel like, even if you're on a first life tune, like I was saying to you earlier, this tune I'm on right now only has 3 past lives, and I don't have that many Reaper points either. This character only has 16 Reaper points, but I can do fairly well doing up to like R4 by myself on this character with all the temporary hit points I have, with the little minion that I use, all the different spells. Like I have access to Hold Monster. Like I'm able to, you know, hold my own in R4. Now, would I die? Probably, yeah. But I've got a pretty good shot at handling a lot of the stuff that it would throw at me. And that allows me to do, you know, work towards getting more points. And then the higher this goes, like if I could double that and get to like 32 points, I would feel a lot stronger. So it's like definitely worth the grind to get at least up to your first like 30 points, and then after that it's just like coasting, especially if you're just doing R1s. It just would feel super easy. Now if you're doing R10s, that you could have 200 points and it's still going to be challenging, just because R10s are super challenging. I find it to be a very rewarding power system because you feel it. It's not as daunting as the reincarnation system in DDO, where, you know, you have to, like, let's say you wanted to do triple completionist. Well, you might as well hunker down because, you know, you're going to be doing past lives for the next 6 months. It's just a little bit overwhelming to think about trying to chase triple completionist. I am almost fully triple completionist on my main character. I was, but now since they added Eladrin, I also didn't do like a Tabaxi iconic. Like there's a few things I still need to do, but I've been going after that triple completionist for like 5 years. Like I'm just not in a rush to do it. But the point is, it's not something that, unless you really wanted to like grind at it like crazy, you could do quickly. But with Reaper, that's different. You can certainly jump in epics and legendary content. You could jump into like high skull Reaper groups and just hang out in the back and throw heals on people, and you would quickly, if you were doing like R8 or higher quests, you would gain a lot of points really quick, especially if you use like an elixir, like an XP elixir. And so you could quickly get like 20 or 30 points. People do that on hardcore. The top tier rewards for hardcore season, you need 20 points, and people do that like super quick in a week or two. Like it doesn't take that long to do that at all. So the next thing that we'll talk about, as we're sort of talking about builds and what the best build is and why the best build is what it is are the layers of defense that you need to consider as you're solving problems. You want to basically, the first rule of thumb, hands down, is you want to min-max yourself. Like you really, and this is especially true, the higher skull that you go, the more min-maxed you want to be. You want to try to squeak out every bit of power that you can, because the debuffs that are in place in Reaper quests really do like handicap you, in the sense that min-maxing will allow you to overcome those easier. So you want to do as much min-maxing as you can. That means optimizing your ability scores, your skill points, your feats, following the build guide. If you find a build that you like, follow the guide, because most people who make guides are like putting them together with a goal. So like if you found a build and the build says this can handle doing Reaper, they're going to have optimized this already for you, so you won't have to think about it. They'll probably also have like certain gear recommendations, although gearing is something else that you want to do, like min-maxing, you know, farming for like the right filigrees for you, getting all your Sentient XP in your weapon to get it fully upgraded. Like all those things help when you're min-maxing. So make use of every bit of power that you can. Get your ability stats as high as you can. Probably the most important thing you want to take into consideration is your hit points. If you have under 1,000 hit points, you need to solve that problem. You want to figure out how to get over 1,000 hit points. You should have over 1,000 hit points. By the time you're at end game, I would say now level 34 is the cap. A better goal to shoot for is 2,000 hit points. That may be unachievable for you, but anywhere between 1 and 2,000 hit points would be acceptable for R1. If you're under 1,000 hit points, people are going to notice if you pug. They're probably going to feel like you're just going to get instantly killed, which is probably what would happen. Like you want to have over 1,000 hit points. The way to do that is to utilize items that have high constitution. You could take feats such as toughness is the name of the feat that would grant you more hit points. There are also specific builds that, you know, if you did the Dragon Lord has access to a lot of feats. So you could do like a single weapon fighting, and that would grant you a lot more hit points. You could take Shield Mastery, that would grant you a bunch of hit points. Like there's a whole bunch of ways to stack a lot of hit points. It's something that you definitely want to try for. So the goal, I always say, is by end game, you want to have at least 2,000 hit points realistically, just as a baseline. 1,000 is the minimum, but you know, like I said, closer to 2,000 is better. And then realistically, a really solid number is 4,000 hit points for end game. You can see like I'm not there on this character here, but I'm sitting here right now in the Hall of Heroes with my temporary hit points that are popped on me. I have 2,200 hit points, which is really good. It's like a solid place to be for a spellcaster at level 32. And then when I hit all of my buffs and I get all of the stuff rolling on me, I get almost 3,000. So considering that I'm spellcasting, 3,000 hit points is pretty decent for Reaper questing. I would like to get it a little higher, but you know, I mean, it's you know, it's all like a work in progress. So shoot for 2,000, get at least over 1,000. If you're under 1,000, that is a problem you absolutely need to solve immediately. And then obviously we're talking about end game. When you're leveling up, when you're heroic, when you're low level, you just want to get basically as many hit points as you can get, but there's no magic number for heroics. You know, you want a lot of hit points though. Like, you know, it's something to just keep in mind. Like, you're always trying to get as many hit points as you can. So that might mean like you carry false life potions with you. You use aid scrolls. Like, you're just constantly trying to stack sources of temporary hit points, because temporary hit points are not debuffed by the Reaper settings. So you can always take advantage of that with like an aid potion. You can heal yourself with temporary hit points. Spell like false life is really good to have at low level when you're doing like low level Reaper questing. And you want to get your numbers as high as you can get them. So your ability scores, you want to min-max them to get them. Always min-max your main ability score, whatever it is. If you're a fighter, using strength, and get your strength as high as you can. If you're a caster, using intelligence, get your intelligence as high as you can. You want your spell DCs, if you're a caster, to be over 100. Now, I'm not sure what the new number is going to be now that we're level cap 34, but a good baseline for your spell DCs is 100 as the minimum for end game. When you're questing in Reaper, you know, when you cast a hold monster, for example, you want that DC to be 100, at least 100 or higher. Like I said, I'm not sure where the new number for the new meta, because they just changed the game with this new DLC, is going to land. That it may be 120, it may be 150, I don't know, but you want to have at least 100. If you're below that, that's a problem that you need to solve. And you can solve that by getting better gear, getting better filigrees, min-maxing your character with feats. You know, go check out your destiny trees, look at a build guide for someone who, you know, maybe they're playing the same class as you, but the higher the number is better. You always want to try to min-max. When it comes to saving throws, min-maxing yourself for saving throws, 80 is the target number that you want to have for your saving throws. So reflex save 80, will save 80, fortitude save 80. Now, those are probably going to be impossible to get, but I'm telling you, that's like the number that you want to shoot for. So I'm not even anywhere near that on this character. I have 58, 56, and 53. So I feel like my saving throws are a little bit low, but I'm trying. Like, I have my eye on like trying to get things that would boost my saving throws. So I'm not worrying about failing a death saving throw, or getting a lot of damage from an explosion, failing a reflex save or something like that. It's just something to think about as you're building your character. You want to get your saving throws as high as you can get them. Don't worry about armor class unless you're a tank. You can see my armor class is only 80. That's terrible. It's super, super low, but you don't really care about armor class unless you're a tank. If you are a tank, then you want your armor class to be at least 400. 500. Like, you have to blast your armor class and really get it up there in order for you to actually start tanking. But below 400, it's just like not having anything, so it's not anything to worry about. What normal characters do instead of worrying about armor classes, we focus on PRR and MRR, these two numbers right here. And the goal for PRR and MRR are pretty simple. For doing Reaper questing, R1, you want to have at least 100 PRR and you want to have at least 50 MRR. That's like the bare minimum. You can see, like, I'm actually right there. I have 105 PRR and I have 50 MRR. The numbers will go up a little bit when I go into a Reaper quest, and as I cast like buffs on myself and do other stuff, it's right there. I'm like at the bare minimum on this character. So definitely for this character, I have work to do, like, but it's a good starting point. You can see like right there where I am. So that's the bare minimum. Obviously, the higher, the better. Another thing you want to consider are your concealment, your ghostly, your dodge, your other layers of defense. We'll take a look at my character right here. I have Incorporeal from ghostly that gives me 10%. When I cast my displacement, my concealment goes to 50%, and then my dodge is 13. what we talked about earlier is if I go into an R1, automatically it's -5 for Incorporeality and -10 for Concealment. So I would be debuffed in R1 to 5% and 40%, but the dodge is not debuffed by Reaper. So you can always benefit from dodge. It's always worth stacking dodge as high as you can get it because it is not debuffed by the Reaper system at all. And it's something to notice in the Reaper tree itself when you're putting together your character. Even though I don't have any points in Grim Barricade is usually the tree that I would recommend to do first, because in this tree here, up this entire line, you can just gain dodge. This is all dodge, and dodge is not debuffed by Reaper. So you can gain dodge, you can gain constitution that give you more hit points, you can gain more saving throws right here, and then you can gain more PRR, and that also is what you gain on this lower thing here. You gain more hit points and more PRR, more saving throws. So a lot of stuff in this tree right here to keep you alive. Highly recommended. I just did this tree here because this character got most of the Reaper points by jumping into R10 groups, and I just wanted to make sure that my hold monster stuck because my saving throw isn't super high. This character is not really min-maxed to the max like my main is. So in order to help me out, I buffed up my spell casting using this middle tree here, which is the caster tree that gets me a higher main stat and higher DCs for my spells. So that's why I made that decision there. But so that's what you want to do. And then the other thing to keep in mind too is you need to make sure that you have some form of fast movement, whatever that is, whether it's a gap closer. Your movement speed, you want to have at least your minimum at 30%, which is the maximum you can have for striding. I have that on my boots. You can see that speed 30. Like that's bare minimum for Reaper questing, so you can move out of the way if you have to. But then something else you want to have is like a fast movement option, however you get it. I have it here in the form of Misty Escape. If I punch that, you see I just leapt forward. Monks get that, Dragon Lords get that, Favorite Souls get that. It's a bunch of different ways to get it. You could go into Exalted Angel and get Exalted Flight as your core tier 3 for Exalted Angel. A lot of people do that. It's perfectly solid. It's a reason why Exalted Angels Exalted Flight is an S tier ability. It's because it allows you to move in and out of combat trouble. It's like the Monk Abundant Step. It's really something that you want to have access to, especially if you're doing Reaper content, because you will be able to like get away from a Carnage Reaper or get closer to a Fear Reaper, whatever you need to do. And so hopefully that gives you everything you need to know to start doing Reaper, the basics in DDO. Without a doubt, Reaper questing is probably the most important thing you can do in Dungeons & Dragons Online, just simply because it's like the #1 hands down best source of XP. It's the best source of like items with the best buffs on them. Probably the best way that you could carry out whatever master plan you have for playing the game, whether it's just logging in and having fun casually with your friends, or whether you were doing like a master triple completionist idea, or whether you want to make yourself an army of raiding tunes that you did all the different raids on. Having Reaper points, unless you decided that you just really didn't want to go into Reaper ever, then you would. But something to keep in mind about the bonuses from the Reaper tree is once you hit this 3rd level here and beyond, you start to keep these bonuses even when you are not in Reaper quests. So they affect you when you're in all other quests. So if you were going to raid and you're not, let's say you're doing elite raids, you would still benefit from the power that you gain from these cores, even if you're not in a Reaper quest. So that's a lot of reason why people will chase 100 Reaper points, is because they can gain a lot of power for their character even when they're not in Reaper, even when they're just hanging around doing any old like elite raid, or let's say you went to the Feywild and you wanted to do that Feywild raid on normal. Well, you would still get all of the extra stuff in these cores on your character. +1 to all saves, +20 hit points, and it would just be on your character at all times. So that's yet another reason to chase after the Reaper points. And then if you're a person who likes cosmetics, you've got the Reaper eyes, the Reaper pet, you've got the Reaper wings, all things that people like to show off. It's FOMO, you know, we like FOMO. It's good. Like, we want as many cool things as we can get. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this guide. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments and respond to everybody. And I really appreciate it. Thanks very much for the time. See ya.
Where are you going? Hunting for gold that is flowing. Somewhere in the cold world, here there is no knowing. Hey la, oh la la la. We love if there's a standing stone. Let's make camp. We love games. Let's make camp and play more games. Hey la, oh la la. We love games. There's a standing stone. Let's make camp. We love games. Let's make camp and play more games. Hey la, oh la la. We love games. Where are you going? There's no knowing what magic awaits, what evil is growing. Hey la, oh la la. We love games. There's a standing stone. Let's make camp. We love games. Oh la la. Hunting old crypts is folly. Just play games and be jolly. Magical treasures hide in the dark, so rest in it and embark. We love games. There's a standing stone. Let's make camp. We love games. Let's make camp and play more games. There's a standing stone. Let's make camp. We love games. Let's make camp and play more games. Hey la.